Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, or ISAS for short, South Asian Diaspora.org Network, and Tickled Media, I warmly welcome you to today's event entitled Entrepreneur 360-Degree, the Diaspora Experience. This is the first of a series of networking sessions of the South Asian Diaspora.org Network, which is part of ISA's South Asian Diaspora Convention. ISA successfully held the inaugural South Asian Diaspora Convention last year, with more than 1,000 people attending the two-day event. The next one is eagerly being awaited for, and the second South Asian Diaspora Convention will be held in November next year. Preparations are underway, and participants can definitely expect big names to be part of this convention. Details and registration of the South Asian Diaspora Convention 2013 will be posted on our website, the South Asian Diaspora website, shortly, so do look out for them. With that, it's my pleasure now to invite Ravi Mantha, a successful young entrepreneur, angel investor, and CEO of Tickled Media, to share more about today's event, as well as to take us through the South Asian Diaspora Convention website. Ravi, please.
Thank you, Sitara, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the South Asian Diaspora Networking Forum. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Roshni, and I'm the CEO of Tickled Media. Tickled Media runs the South Asian Diaspora.org portal in collaboration with the Institute of South Asian Studies and NUS. Whoops, sorry. So it brings me great pleasure to actually kick off today's event, which will be the first of many exciting events that we have planned for the South Asian Diaspora.org members. Before diving into today's event, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the South Asian Diaspora portal, which I'm guessing most of you are now familiar with since you're here at today's event. For those of you who are a little unfamiliar with the portal, it was created to celebrate the diverse South Asian community across the world, and it was a collaboration between NUS, ISAS, and my company, Tickled Media. So this is how the portal looks like. You can visit it at going to southasiandiaspora.org. So besides celebrating the diverse South Asian community and across the world, it was also designed to create awareness of the South Asian Diaspora Convention, which Sitara was just talking about. It will be taking place in 2013, and details will be revealed later on the website itself. The portal targets young adults and professionals of South Asian descent, people just like you and me. And the portal actually provides an excellent opportunity for these like-minded individuals to interact with one another. So it's targeted at young adults, professional of South Asian descent. SouthAsianDiaspora.org features a plethora of different articles that covers various beats, such as business, policy, lifestyle, events, society, and much, much more. Since launching the site mid this year, we have interviewed a number of political dignitaries and academics such as Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Professor Tan Tai Yong, and Kiran Mirchandani, entrepreneurs such as Ash Singh and Sivakumar Tulsaidos, media veterans such as Daisy Irani and Lovelin Walia, young stalwarts such as Mohan Bilani, Saurabh Sharma, and Pankit Doshi. We are also content partners with a number of other publications such as Pardesi Pulse, Indian Spice, Wedding Sutra, South Asian Post, and the Pravasi Today. Today's event, Entrepreneur 360, is a topic that is close to the hearts of many South Asians, including myself. I'm sure most of us have ventured into the wonderful world of entrepreneurship and have a number of our own funny anecdotes, stories about our journey, and trials and tribulations that we have experienced. In the next 2 hours, you will be regaled with stories and insights from our speakers and our panelists, who will be sharing their unique South Asian experience about running their own business or investing in other businesses. To start off with, let me actually share a little story that happened to me when I was living in New York, and I decided to plunge into the world of entrepreneurship and start my own business. Like most folks, the first person that you want to tell the news to is your parents. So I waited for an appropriate hour and called Singapore to tell my mom the good news. I went, "Mom, I have exciting news for you." Before I could tell her what my exciting news was, she immediately responded with, "Oh my God, for you. I was immediately perplexed and started wondering if my cousin had actually spilled the beans on what I was going to do. But whatever the case was, I was so elated that my parents were so supportive of me actually starting up a business. As I launched into more details about my idea and what business I was going to run, my mother immediately went quiet and she whispered, "Oh, you're starting a business. Okay. I thought you were starting a family." I can't say I'm not disappointed, but kids today, they have their own will. So I'm sure many of you can relate to this incident about having to deal with your own South Asian parents who tell you what to do, and they do not want you to give up a cushy job or put your personal life on hold so that you can start up something. And I'm sure each and every single one of you have your own unique South Asian story to share, much like our upcoming speakers and our panelists. So before I go on any further, I'd like to thank you again for attending today's event. I'm positive you're going to have a great evening and you're going to enjoy all of the speakers and the panel sessions that we have coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshni. It's my pleasure now to invite Ravi Mantha, Chairman of TIE Singapore, to present his topic, A Look at Social Entrepreneurship Trends in Southeast Asia. Ravi, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ravi Mantha. I'm the incoming chairman of TIE Singapore, which is a global network of entrepreneurs. I'm also a local angel investor. I moved to Singapore just over a year ago, and I'm a co-founder of a social entrepreneurship organization called the BOP Hub. So we're targeting eliminating poverty at the base of the pyramid. I wanted to talk to you today about social entrepreneurship. I wanted to talk to you today about social entrepreneurship because, if you look at the whole development space, it's still very much dominated by nonprofits and NGOs and charities, essentially. The problem with charities, I find, coming from the for-profit world, is that they tend to be very insular and not scalable. When you're looking for private contributions or charity money every time you need to scale the organization, it's very difficult to really get big. Some do it, but it's not really a sustainable way of doing it. The other thing is that charities don't undergo mergers and acquisitions. Right? When was the last time you heard of two charities merging? People saying, "Oh, you know what we're doing doesn't work, let's just get acquired by somebody else." That doesn't really happen in the nonprofit world. And the founders in charitable organizations tend to be quite insular, actually. They, there's really no shortage of egos because people are investing with emotions and they are very passionate about what they're doing. But that doesn't mean that they don't have egos and they don't get arrogant about their mission and about what they're doing. In the case of the private sector world, people like that, particularly if they're public markets companies, they get replaced. But in NGOs, once you're running or you started an NGO, no one can really fire you. You just become more and more, more of what you already were when you started the NGO. And at the other side is that people actually invest in NGOs and in the impact space. And these are the impact funds that are out there. It's a relatively new space, it's a few years old. But social impact funds essentially look at NGOs and the base of the pyramid and they try to invest in them. And the people who run those impact funds typically, I find, are also very much with a passionate and emotional mindset. They're not really thinking with their heads. They have pet projects, they love alternative energy, or they love rural electrification, so things that are wonderful if you make it happen, but they don't really make money. And this is the reason why impact investors tend to have very poor financial track records. They have excellent social track records. So if you talk about lives saved and all these wonderful things, that they're doing a good job. But if you're talking about getting financial investment into the NGO space, what we need is really a different model. And I think that's where Singapore can help. So the question is, why social enterprise? Why even look at that space at all, given all the problems that social enterprise has had? The first point is that the traditional venture model has had some real problems. If you look at venture funds since 2003, most of them are underwater. They're not making money. So the traditional model of, I promise you 25% return and high risk, well, the risk has happened, but the returns have not been delivered. So I think people are wondering, what should we do about the whole venture capital business? And now, if you look at startups, they're coming up with creative ways of getting funded, convertible debt. But these things just tend to offer lower return to investors, but that means that there has to be an adjustment of expectations. But in my mind, promising low returns is not a bad thing at all, because at the end of the day, if you structure it properly, low return comes with lower risk also. So this thing is running away from me. So what we're finding now is that the entire social enterprise space is sort of splitting into things. One is lower risk models with lower commensurate return, and then very high risk models like crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is something where you can take business and you can get it funded by small amounts of money from lots and lots of people using social media. And that's a wonderful thing, because a lot of people who have pet causes, they would love to invest in these things. And most of these businesses, by the way, won't make money, but it doesn't matter because people invest out of passion, and they're not really looking to make a financial return. They're looking to make an emotional return, which they'll get out of crowdfunding. So in my mind, this is a fantastic time to be a social entrepreneur, because we're now entering an age where there's all these problems that we can see in the world, and those can actually be realistically solved by putting capital into them. And what we need are more people who are taking up social entrepreneurship, starting businesses that help people at the base of the pyramid. So what's happening in Singapore? In my experience, the charity NGO scene here is not very big. The main reason is that the focus in Singapore has always been on wealth creation, not so much charitable giving. And people are not really into it. They think, the money just goes wasted. I don't see any return. What are the KPIs? And they're not very comfortable with it. The consequence is that if you look at the US, where 2% of the GDP is charitable giving, Europe is half of that, and Singapore is hardly 0.25% of GDP. So it's very, very low in Singapore relative to the size of the economy. But I think that social impact, Singapore style, has a place, because the same reasons why Singaporeans are a little bit reluctant to perhaps take part in NGOs and give to charities, I think they'd be much more happy with social enterprise, where it's an actual business, it's making a profit, and people are more comfortable with that. That's just a very, very Singaporean approach. The point is that a social business, because of various problems, particularly in terms of the wealth of the actual consumers that it's targeting, they tend to make low returns, but they're very consistent and very steady returns if you structure the business properly. And in my mind, the future belongs to these scalable hybrid solutions that bring the market-based approaches to NGOs. So what we're taking is we're looking at the best practices of NGOs and saying, hey, you should scale this further, and we can offer you private capital and go out there, become for-profit and scale it. So this focus on making money means that it's much more sustainable, it's much more scalable going forward. As a very simple example, you should all think about it, right? If I offered you 10% in return every year with very low risk, would you invest in a social business? Now, how much money are you getting by putting your money in a bank at the moment? Right? So I think that's the kind of approach that we want. People not so much asking you for money for philanthropy, but saying, give us your money instead of putting it in a bank, and we can give you a very consistent but a decent rate of return, and you're helping helping reduce or eliminate poverty in the world. So why Singapore? Singapore is clearly a magnet for the regional rich, and Singaporeans, in my mind, can show the region the way to stable wealth. It's obviously a country that in one generation has really gone from third world to first. But I think more importantly, Singaporeans must absolutely connect with the rest of Asia for their own sake, not for Asia's sake. But we live in a very big and volatile neighborhood with a lot of poor people, and I think it's very, very important that Singaporeans themselves, in order to sustain the national identity, have to connect with the region, with Asia. But they have to do it through personal experience, not so much through writing checks. They have to visit, they have to be involved. At the very least, they'll understand how wonderful life is here and how privileged they are, just simply by being engaged with the rest of the region. I just wanted to conclude and say that bringing for-profit models to the world's poor is the most sustainable form of development, and that's something that I think it really gels with the Singaporean psyche of measuring everything and of looking for best practice. Thank you very much.
If you have any questions or clarifications you want to ask, Ravi is more than willing to take them.
What's your view on the ecosystem for social entrepreneurs here? I mean, are you happy? Are you ecstatic? Do you think there's a lot to be done?
I think there's a lot to be done. If I look around the ecosystem, you could probably count the number of social entrepreneurs in single digits. I think that's partly a function of what Roshni was talking about earlier, which is that the mindset has to be coming from the parent side. They should be encouraging their children to go into any kind of entrepreneurship, and particularly social entrepreneurship. That's just something. We have to develop that ecosystem. It won't happen overnight. We need more role models. We need more people to explain why is social entrepreneurship so meaningful and so enriching, and for the person who's doing it, not just for the consumers.
Okay, so I'm sure you might have thought about this, but how do you differentiate yourself being a profitable NGO versus some corporate having an ulterior motive of making money? Because in this third world, or the countries you're talking about within the Southeast Asian space, it's more about people promising a lot of things, and then suddenly one day you see in the newspaper that they're all gone. Yeah, with so many crores or so many rupiah that's gone away in a day. So how do you plan, or what do you think? What's your advice in people coming into this entrepreneurship space, social entrepreneurship space, on how to control that, or how do you propose that to people?
Well, I mean, it's a good point, right? It's corporates with an ulterior motive. I'm not quite sure I agree that there is such a thing as an ulterior motive. Making money is a fairly standard reason why you start a business. It's more about a question of the expectations. Going for 25-30% returns in an economy that's growing at 5% a year or even 8% a year is, that's one way of making money. But what we're looking at is that if you target those kind of returns, you're going to exclude a lot of perfectly viable business opportunities. And a lot of those opportunities will involve helping the poor. And that's kind of where there's a big gap in the market. People, the way the world is organized right now, the capitalist world is, they chase returns. Right? Whether they get there or not is another story, but your investment decision is driven by a certain hurdle rate. You have an expectation. In the venture world, typically, say 25% per annum. That's what you're trying to. If you don't make that return, as a venture capitalist, you don't get paid. It just doesn't. The economics don't work out. So the decisions you make in terms of your investment are very different when you're chasing 25% versus when you're chasing 10. I mean, I'll give you a live example. I've invested in an education company in India, secondary schools. It's a wonderfully scalable model. It's in low-income housing estates, and the entrepreneur she's doing world-class schools. But because of the structural issues in Indian education, she cannot offer more than 12 to 14% return a year. Because there's something called the Right to Education Act. There's a legally mandated return that you can't make more than that. So a typical venture fund wouldn't touch that. But it's a wonderful model where you can make 12 to 14%. There's nothing wrong with that return. if you adjust your expectations downwards. And there's no technology risk, there is some operational risk, but that's the kind of project I love to be part of. Maybe one last question.
Good evening, my name is Joseph. I looked at some of the statistics you showed from research, quite interesting, and also I should say very intriguing, in the sense, United States you said 2% impact to society and 1% in Europe, and minuscule in Asia, especially in Singapore, 0.25 something, right? Now, if I can ask you a question, in the Asian mind, Asian mentality, psyche, we have been through all religions and all for centuries and millennia. All religions actually started in Asia, in the Middle East, India, and all that, the history. Why is that the Asian mind is so closed and not giving back to society versus the Western mind?
I'm not sure the Asian mind is any different than the Western mind. I always love to use the example of littering. Right? If you look at certain countries in Asia, most countries in Asia, in the poorer parts of Asia, there's litter is everywhere, right? The same thing was true in the US and in Europe in the 50s and 60s, right? The same thing was true here in Singapore around the same time. What happened? There was a campaign, a government campaign, a public awareness campaign that said, this is not acceptable. We need to, have no graffiti. We need to clean up our streets. And so people's mindset changed. It's the same thing with anything that's a large-scale issue like charitable giving. You can actually change people's mindsets by having a proper awareness campaign. Now, there is a difference in that, okay, it's not directly comparable because the US has reasonably higher tax rates compared to Singapore. So when you offer a tax incentive for charitable giving, which the US government does, it's more meaningful. Now, Singaporean government also offers significant tax rebates for charitable giving, up to 250%. But because tax rates here are already low, that particular incentive doesn't have as much of an impact. But I genuinely believe that the Singaporean mindset is not so much that they don't want to do philanthropy, it's that they want to see a tangible return from the philanthropy that they do. So if you can show that to them in the form of a return, even if they don't take the return, they're probably happy to just give the return right back to the organization that's producing it. But they don't want to put money and then watch it disappear down a hole. That's just a very, in my limited experience, a Singaporean mindset. And I think it's quite reasonable to expect that. I think a lot of NGOs waste a lot of money. I mean, the staggering number that I found is that in India, in the NGO space, 85% of money spent goes on expenses. All right? So who would want to support an NGO system where that's happening? I think social businesses are much more tangible because you can't fool the return. The rate of return is there for everyone to see. And that's something that's a KPI that you can't fool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravi. Next, we have William Klippgen, angel investor and CEO of Tigris Capital, to share with us the 5 things all investors should look for. William, please.
Hello. Just switch slides. So we're changing topic a little bit. So kind of adding kind of entrepreneurship, not only social. So let's see. So my name is William Klippgen. This one, right? And I have been a business angel in Singapore since 2003, basically investing in small tech startups. So very happy to be here today. One of you asked me, where in South Asia are you from? I checked on Wikipedia. Norway is not part of South Asia, although it's a very big area, as I found out. But one of my most successful businesses are actually run by South Asians, and that's kind of a claim to that. One of my favorite business partners are South Asian, so I'm somewhat related to all of you. So let's go on to presentation. So what do I actually do? So a business angel, as I see it, is basically one that invests very small amounts of money, usually very early on in the business lifespan. these are just to explain to you what I'm doing and what I have been doing. These are my companies right now, most of them, on like a two-dimensional chart. Estimated market cap up there, how much the companies were, and basically what, okay, unfortunately you can't see because of the table, but underneath there's a dimension that says like basically going from baby to exit, which is basically when I sell the companies, right? So my job as an investor is basically to push these small investments till a profitable stage, to near exit stage, like for example Property Guru, and then finally, hopefully, to an exit stage where the investors actually get their money back. So that's my job. That's probably why I was asked to come and talk to you about what are the 5 things I think would make me happy as an investor. So let's move on to the first thing. So this I picked up from one of my Indian founders. He always spoke about good karma, and I didn't really understand very much of that, but I started to study karma. He wouldn't do a business deal unless he thought it was good karma in it. And he sat in the board meeting and rejected things because it was not good karma. And I actually found out it makes a lot of sense. If you are going to work with someone for a long time during pretty rough periods where perhaps you run out of money or the product is wrong, you need to have very, very well-founded mutual respect between, investor and entrepreneurs. It could be shared experiences. It could be that you have shared values. For example, it's very hard to work with unethical entrepreneurs if you are ethical yourself, because at some point of time, communication is going to break down and you will not be able to respect the other one. Trustworthiness comes from the same thing. Basically, you need to feel that you speak the same language as the entrepreneur. That really helps. That's the first thing. The next thing, at least I look for, is that you can feel there's a true passion in the entrepreneur. I mean, his main objective is not raising money from you and then, tell all his friends that they raised $500,000 and, starting to buy his new TV. It's like that you have a true passion for what you're doing. And basically convince me that you would have done this even without my money. Even if no investor believes in you, you will still do that. That's what I did when I was an entrepreneur. I actually started doing my product even before I got investments because no investor believed in my product. So another sign of true passion is that you have some skin in the game. Perhaps you put in long hours before you even meet the investor. You put in your own money. When you meet this entrepreneur in the first meeting, he actually ignites the passion in you for his product. You come out to the meeting and you actually also think that this is a really good idea. You come back home and you think, okay, probably wasn't that good idea, but you get this feeling that this is really, really fantastic. And this is the same way he will speak to his customers. This is the same way he will speak to his future employees. He will also be able to ignite passion in them. If he can ignite passion in you, and you're like an investor, very jaded, he will definitely be able to ignite passion in the market around him and in his employees. And the last thing that we speak a lot about, like Richard Branson, you kind of personify. You have a personality that personifies your brand. You can see that you can be the head, you can be the face of this business. The entrepreneur can be the face of this business going forward. So that's number 2. Number 3 is that whatever you want to start, if you want to create the next copy of a deal site in Singapore, or if you want to kind of create, something really, really advanced, you'd like to see that the entrepreneur actually knows what he's talking about. That there is some element of deep knowledge, that he has sat there, night after night and studied the markets. He has been studying the competitors, he has been studying the competing technologies, he's been studying, what are people saying about competition. He has been studying the actual subject matter. And you can ask him questions and he will be able to explain it to you. One good test to ask a question is actually to ask him in a way where you actually understand what he's talking about. The last thing that I can look for is that at least you need to have some kind of basic financial understanding. So I don't really think that all entrepreneurs need to really be super in finance, but you need to have some idea about money, how to spend money, especially how to save money. The fourth thing, I think that all VCs, investors look for is that word we hear so many times, which is like scalability. We want the business to be such that if you get more customers, if you go into new markets, the profit margin actually goes up. The cost of delivering each product, the cost of delivering each service goes down as the volume goes up. Another thing that I think is important in this region, where we soon are going to have probably 1 billion people around Singapore, is that you have business that is riding on the rising Asian middle class. I think that's very, very important, especially when you invest out of Singapore. That, actually the market is so big that, in many senses, when I look at entrepreneurial ideas, I'm not so concerned about competition, because there's always going to be competition. I'm not so concerned about that. It must be, super right now, but with the right scalability, with the right founder in this growing market, I mean, a lot of businesses can actually succeed, as long as you get at least these 4 points right, because you have a rising customer wealth, you have a rising number of potential customers. And then the last part, if you can see that, is something that's quite important, and this is something that usually only materializes after a few years working with the entrepreneur, and that is shared goals. That this is something I now try to find out before I invest. In my first investments, I was finding this out much later, which is creating a lot of trouble for me in some cases, because if the entrepreneur doesn't have the same exit goals as you have, I mean, you're really going towards two different places, and you're not on the same train. An investor, in the end of the day, I'm not doing social entrepreneurship. I would like to start that after Ravi's speech, but I'm mostly doing this because I want to make money. And I've been working with entrepreneurs that actually tell me after 4 years that their aim is not to make money, and I say, why? Why didn't you tell me this like 4 years ago? So it's very important that the entrepreneur kind of is quite open with his goals to his investor. Otherwise, you will have a lot of conflicts. You need to speak about, how much will you sell your company for? When do you want to sell your company? Do you want to sell your company? Or things like things that also create a lot of potential tension is when the company grows and gets bigger. It's very nice when you are 3 entrepreneurs, but what if the company does very well? Perhaps you would see that the only way for this company to survive is to replace the CEO, for example, or to get a more competent team of VPs in the company. If the founder is generally against that, you're going to have a big trouble. So also agree that up front. So to make investors happy, be very open about, do you want best practice in the company, or do you really want to insist on doing it your way? Perhaps for a period of time, but be open about it. That's basically it. So just to recap for you, good karma, true passion in the entrepreneur, some deep domain knowledge, a scalable business model, and openness about the goals you have for your business. What are you actually trying to achieve? Are we on the same page? So with that, I can take a few questions.
So I know a lot of investors are looking at the track record of entrepreneurs who've started some businesses before. So what about people, what do you look for in a first-time entrepreneur?
Thanks for the question. I think I'm generally looking for the 5 things I just shared with you. So you don't really need to have a track record. I think what I'm looking for is to be able to start that dialogue, to kind of, try to find out if you have those 5 items I just shared with you. So that can be done in a number of ways, but basically, speaking to you, it could be speaking to your, let's say you come out to university, I can speak to your professor, or to your friends, or anyone that you would give as a reference, I guess. But I think my point is that it's so much more about personality and who you are right now and what you want to do than what you've done before. But it's absolutely great if you have done a business before. If it has failed or hasn't failed, it doesn't really matter, because I would know that you've been through a lot of the things that I would like to see in you. So.
Hi. Question. Looked at the graph you just showed. All the businesses were tech-enabled websites. What's the fascination with tech-enabled businesses? And this is a thread I see running across most investors. Why not real brick-and-mortar businesses?
I guess you're right. Thanks for the question. It's a majority of tech companies. I think the fascination, especially with VCs or investors with tech, is that you can scale. So the fascination is that if you get things right, if you do things right, you have a pretty much, you can even cover the world market with your product. And you can achieve that scalability where you achieve a profit margin of 80% or more, because the cost of delivering the product and service actually goes down so fast. The whole online revolution basically has made it so cheap to start business. So that's another thing. I mean, you can think with most of the businesses, they sometimes require huge investments up front. For example, I've been trying to understand biotech, for example. I think one of my business partners maybe went up there, and the guy said, I would like to start a new business, and for that I needed this machine. It cost $5 million. And that was what I expected to make from this investment, not to kind of give him up front. So I kind of prefer, I think that's why a lot of investors like online businesses, exactly because it's very cheap to start.
Hi. I've actually been working with a couple of startups quite recently. My question to you is that when you take a company from a baby stage and potentially you want to take them to, you want to exit at some point in time, it takes a lot to bring that discipline into a company in terms of whether it's three people in a company or 30. Could you share some experiences of some companies that you've had where you faced similar problems and how you solved them?
No, I can give an example of a company. I think, for example, Tickle Media is a good example where we are trying to grow the team very fast. And I think what has been, Roshni's view on this all the time has always been to hire people that are smarter than herself. And I see a lot of businesses where the CEO refuses to hire people that potentially are smarter than himself because he feels it as a threat to his own control of the company. And again coming back to the shared goals, so try to do best practice, or to kind of do it his way. So it's actually very little people like me can do if the founder is not cooperating. I shouldn't say that, but that's the fact. And you can read all the agreements we signed, and you can use the best lawyers, but you can't really force a lot of these things. You need to find that out before. So I've seen how companies do that really well by empowering employees, introducing good routines, making sure that people actually are smarter, and looking for qualities in people that go beyond domain knowledge, but actually looking at their character, their values, and so on. I think that's very important. So that I think is the best way to approach it. Okay. No more questions? All right. Thank you very much.